Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 3 of the Dan Wilkins Show. Last week we interviewed Adam Capodisi, a former Independent Leagues catcher from 2000 to 2005. This week on the show we have a former two-time Stanford women's basketball champion and a WNBA player from 1999 to 2002. We have Val Whiting on the show. Welcome to the show, Miss Whiting.
Thank you very much. Just call me Coach Val. It's fine.
All right, sounds good to me. So, Coach Val, most of the information I'm getting for this episode, I guess you could call it, is coming from your Wikipedia page, which for my YouTube viewers, I will link in the description below so that you can read more about her and what she has done with the Stanford Cardinal, with the Minnesota Lynx, with the Detroit Shock, all of the teams that she played for over the years. But we're going to start off with just the early years, which obviously it wasn't, the smoothest experience, unfortunately, from what you said in the Wikipedia article, from interviews that you had done before. You underwent a lot of bullying. You had a lot of, you could say, oppression from other people who were just trying to put you down. How did you manage to overcome that and just power through no matter what?
Sports helped me a lot. I got started playing basketball because I got cut from the cheerleading squad, and I only tried out for cheerleading because I wanted to be accepted by the quote-unquote cool kids and not be picked on anymore. So I got cut, and then my math teacher said, "Hey, Val, why don't you try basketball?" And that's how I got started. And I was horrible. I was scoring for the other team. At least one game, I would get confused when you switch baskets. I would turn and not score my basket with the other team's basket. But by 10th grade, my dad took an interest in me, and would wake up on weekends at 6 a.m. to go play, which I hated, but now I'm grateful for it. But he took an interest in me, and by 10th grade, I got my first letter from my D1 program. So sports really helped me, and it helps a lot of girls with their confidence, and self-esteem. And to be honest, those bullies actually drove me. When I was working out as a 9th grader, as a 10th grader, trying to succeed, I was thinking about the stuff that people used to say about me. That was my driving force.
Okay, so obviously, considering what you had said before, you got that recruitment letter from Princeton, but you did not actually gain an interest in basketball until 10th grade, even though you played before. So by that, do you mean that you didn't even watch NBA games or didn't have any interest in that? Did you have any interest in any other sport besides that?
No, I never played any sports at all. And the ironic thing is both my mom and my dad played basketball. My dad played college basketball. My mom got an offer to play college basketball, but they never talked to me about basketball, which was like why? So I had no sports. I didn't watch it. My sport was tag. I like playing tag and freeze tag. So, and double dutch. That was it. So, like I said, no exposure to anything, and didn't watch basketball. And back then, women's basketball really wasn't on television. And if it was only on one time a year, and they showed the semifinal and the finals. That was it. So yeah, didn't have any interest until I thought I could be good in 10th grade, and that's when I got motivated.
Well, where did your dad play college ball?
He played for Seton Hall, and then he had this big point shaving incident with some of his teammates for point. You know what point shaving is, right?
Yeah.
Where they're point shaving, and then which means they're fixing the game, and they just shut the whole program down. So that's where. And my father's almost 80, so that was a long time ago.
Well, it's definitely interesting considering that we have a New Jersey school connection here. You got an offer from Princeton. He played for Seton Hall. That's more like a North Jersey thing, considering I'm from South Jersey. So, you got that recruitment letter from Princeton University. How did you react to that, considering that you didn't play any high school basketball at all?
Well, what happened was, the summer between my 9th and 10th grade, I went to a basketball camp where college coaches were going to be there. And they don't do that now. They have, I guess, AAU is that. But for then, you could go to a camp and coaches would come watch you play, not just play games, but go through drills and stuff. And that's where this coach saw me. And when I got that letter, I was like, wait, I can go to college and play basketball? And that's when the light bulb went off. And I'm like, oh my goodness, and I can be good at this. Because I remember I had just started in 7th grade. In the 9th grade, a coach said that I would never be a good basketball player. So my confidence really wasn't really that high. But getting that one letter, you get that one validation from an outside source, which you shouldn't always depend on, but it helped me propel me to the next level.
Absolutely. But when Stanford offered the scholarship to you, and you ended up playing at the Stanford University, was Princeton at the time, was that still on the table, or was that something that you had already kind of dismissed?
No, by the time I was being looked at Stanford, all the top Division I schools in the country were recording me. So Princeton probably wasn't good enough to have my caliber player.
All right, well, considering that you got 2 offers from from prestigious schools like Princeton, which is an Ivy League school, and Stanford, which is very close to an Ivy League school, and their acceptance rate is very low, did you consider yourself a good student academically?
Oh, I had to be. I went to a very competitive private school, all-girls private school, called Ursuline Academy. I'm from Delaware. So, like I said, small, competitive college prep. I majored in biology. I was pre-med at Stanford, and I actually was admitted to medical schools. So going to Stanford, I didn't even think about professional basketball. I just wanted to get my degree and then become a doctor. So yeah, you have to be a good student to play at Stanford, to go to Stanford. You have to be strong.
I mean, when you think of Ivy League schools and their sports, like Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Brown, Cornell, Dartmouth, so many, they usually don't have good sports programs. Like the Ivy League schools, I could think the best athlete from an Ivy League school that I could think of is Ryan Fitzpatrick, the quarterback for the Dolphins. But when you look at some other schools that have very low acceptance rates, but also are very good at sports, they're very far and few between. Stanford is one of them. UNC is one of them, and I really can't think of any others that have it's really hard to get in, but they also have really good sports. It's a really hard balance to find, and considering that you got offers from Princeton and Stanford, 2 of the most prestigious schools that are at least decent at sports, it's definitely a good accomplishment to have, even if you only went to Stanford. I mean, you can't go to 2 schools at once. But anyways, how did it feel for you winning that NCAA championship in 1990, less than 5 years after having no interest in basketball whatsoever?
I never thought about that until a couple weeks ago when I was putting together a TikTok of my life in a nutshell. And I was like, wait, I had just started playing basketball. I never put 2 and 2 together, because one thing I don't do, and I'm learning to do better, is I don't stop and smell the roses. I'm always on to the next accomplishment. So I think then I had no idea. I was just happy to win. I didn't think it was anything special. Because that year I was National Freshman of the Year and Pac-10 Freshman of the Year. But I guess most people didn't realize that I just started playing. I had forgotten that I just started playing.
That's very interesting, considering, most people, at least these days, from what I have talked to other people before and from my personal experiences, sports for children, they've been starting off at younger and younger ages. Like for baseball, I talked to Adam Capodici, and he said that he started playing baseball when he was 8 years old, but he's seen other kids who have started playing at 4 or 5 years old, a lot of t-ball, a lot of coach pitch. There's travel teams for kids that are 7, 8 years old, and it was unprecedented back then, but it's becoming more and more common and more of a non-event now. And considering that you didn't start playing basketball until 10th grade, and then less than 5 years later won a national championship for Stanford, and then won it again 2 years later in 1992, that was definitely very, very interesting. And even just winning one national championship is good enough, but winning two is absolutely incredible, considering that that was the only two national championships that Stanford, the Cardinal team, has ever won for their women's basketball program. They've made the Final Four a few times, and unfortunately they didn't win all of those times, but they did make the playoffs a lot, and they have been a very dominant basketball team, especially because of their head coach, Tara VanDerveer. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but anyways.
Tara VanDerveer.
Yes, Tara VanDerveer. She's been the head coach of the Stanford Cardinal for 34 years, and of course, you played with her for a while when you were at Stanford. What was her, I guess, personality like? Like, what was it like working with her and being a player under her coaching knowledge and expertise?
Tara is a basketball genius, but she's gotten better, struggled with the soft skills of being a coach, the people skills, and that's why she had great assistant coaches that did that for the recruiting and everything. But I've learned more from her than any other coach I've ever played for. A lot of the principles she's instilled in me, I pass on the kids that I work with. And I mean, she's in the Naismith Hall of Fame. We just had our 30-year, I know that's like twice your age, anniversary for our first championship. And I saw her back in January, and it was amazing. It's like nothing ever changed. She looks exactly the same, but I know that just like as people, we have to grow. She's grown as a coach, her coaching style, and she's adapted to different players, different personalities, and how things have been changing in the field of coaching and how to push players to be better. I know I'm rambling, but what I'm saying is she was a different coach now than she is. She was different then than she is now.
Absolutely, and I mean, considering that any coach that's been in the business for that long, for 30 plus years, they're going to have a huge adaptation over time. They're going to really change their coaching style over the years once things that they try, they don't work. And if they don't work, then they have to adapt, and I feel like that's something that Tara's really done well with Stanford over the years.
Yeah, she has. For example, when I played at Stanford, and I know you don't know much about basketball yet, we played 3 guards on the outside, 2 post players on the inside. Now, if you watch their team play, sometimes it's 5 players on the outside, and a lot of running and cuts and reading and reacting to the defense is doing, or 4 on the outside, 1 on the inside. So she's changed with the times.
And I mean, considering that she was starting off as the head coach for Stanford in sort of a rough transition, because Dottie McRae, who was the head coach for Stanford before that, she was let go in 1985. VanDerveer took over, and in her first year, she only went 1-7 in conference play. Didn't even make the NCAA tournament until 1987 to 88. That's when they lost it in Sweet 16. But just 2 years after that, she won the NCAA championship just 5 years after being hired by Stanford, and then she won it again in 92. So considering that she started off very, I guess, in a rough start, then just like 5 years later won an NCAA championship, then won it again, and has still been very dominant, making the Final Four even just 2 years ago in 2017. That is definitely a very, very accomplished career for Tara VanDerveer. Now, after you graduated from Stanford in the mid-1990s, what inspired you to play overseas instead of going for a league like the ABL, considering that the WNBA had not been established yet?
Well, so what was going to happen was I got into a top medical school, and I said, I'm going to play basketball for hold my spot. I deferred admissions, hold my spot. I'm going to come back in 2 years. I'm going to play basketball for 2 years and then come back to school. And so I went overseas to Italy, Israel, and then Brazil, and I liked basketball way too much, and I decided to go back to school. Well, put it on hold. And then ABL came about because then you could only go overseas for women's basketball. There's no league here. And in 1996, the ABL was formed, and I played for the San Jose Lasers and the Seattle Reign, and they paid, it's the reason why they probably folded, they paid us six figures for the ABL. And then that folded in 1998, just after 2.5 years, and then that's when I was a 27-year-old rookie for the WNBA with Detroit.
I mean, not a lot of rookies go into any league at 27 years old. You might see it sometimes in baseball. You might see it sometimes in hockey, because baseball and hockey, they all have like their minor league systems. You got to work through ranks to get to where you want to be. So rookies can be anywhere from like 20, 21 years old to even like I've seen guys like Ryan Court of the Seattle Mariners. Like he debuted last year at 31 years old, which yeah. He's not the oldest one to debut, but a lot of the people that actually debut at like older ages, especially in this time in Major League Baseball, they are like coming from overseas themselves. So like from Korea, Japan, all that. So you declared for the draft in 1999 for the WNBA, and that was just 2 years after it formed. Why did you not go right into the WNBA after they had formed, considering that they were a counterpart of the NBA?
One, because at that time the ABL had the better players. A lot of the best players were in the ABL, and two, they were paying 4 times more. The ABL was playing 4 times more, but the WNBA was playing. So, for example, my first year in the WNBA, and then when you sign with when you get drafted to the WNBA, your contract is with the league. It's now with individual teams. That's changed since. It's more like how the NBA is. So, and wherever you were drafted, your salary was set. So I only made $30,000 my first year in the WNBA, whereas in the ABL, I was getting paid $125. So that was the reason why I didn't move.
So was it solely because of the fact that the ABL had folded? Is that why you went to the WNBA in 99?
Yes. That was the only reason.
I mean, because there was like a possibility of you playing back overseas, but at the same time, it's a lot better to play basketball in the U.S. with players that like, or with teams that are like directly affiliated with the NBA. You know, you're playing on NBA courts at sometimes. You are playing in front of a larger crowd than what the ABL would have probably been, and the ABL probably wouldn't be around today, even if they were around when you started up with the WNBA. But the WNBA has really been thriving over the past 20 years, and I think it's been some of their ownership and their pride for what they do with basketball that's really inspired it to thrive over the past couple
I
years.
think that the biggest thing that probably helped the ABL fold was the marketing machine that was behind the WNBA. When I used to come home in the off season, people thought, you're not playing the ABL. They thought I played in the WNBA. And I would say, no, I play in the ABL. So after a while, people didn't even know we existed. And ESPN would refuse to put our highlights on, the ABL highlights, but they would play the WNBA highlights.
Probably some sort of contract thing.
Yeah, we're getting fake. Yep. So it was a matter of time, and who can compete with the glitz and glam of the marketing machine of the NBA.
I don't think many people can. So you missed the 2000 season after having your rookie season at the age of 27 with the Detroit Shock. What was the reason why you missed that 2000 season?
Yeah, I actually just released a TikTok about that. It was my first time ever saying this publicly, but my whole WNBA career, I played with undiagnosed bipolar depression. And so my first year in the WNBA in 1999, I was on the injured reserve, on and off the injured reserve, because I was too depressed to play games or too depressed to come to practice. I just couldn't move. And there will be days when the coach would look at me on the bench, because I came in as a starter. And I don't know what happened. I just went downhill. And the coach would look at me to come in, and I would say, no, I don't want to come in. I just couldn't play. It was just too sick to play. And so I took that whole 2000 season off to recover from depression. And so that's why you see that gap.
And I mean, it's definitely something that I can understand why it wasn't something that you would exactly publicly say after 20 years. I mean, considering that if it was an injury, it would be easily just, oh yeah, I had this, I had that. But no, it's when you have some sort of issue like that, or some sort of just condition where you can't function, but you at the same time you don't want to tell the world why. I can completely understand why it was something that you took until recently to make public, and it's definitely something that I think a lot of people don't disclose, and it's something that a lot of people go through right now, especially during quarantine, considering that they love playing the sports that they love to do, and they can't do it right now, considering of the virus. But at the same time, there's other people on the opposite end of the spectrum where they want to play their sport, but they don't have the motivation, and they have, like what you had, bipolar depression, that would affect their playing ability, and for a negative purpose, they wouldn't play as well.
Yeah, Daniel, it's hard because when you have mental illness, you can't really see it. And so especially as an athlete, when you have to be on, you got to be hyped. You're strong, you're powerful, you got kids looking up to you, you got coaches' salary depending on your performance. It's a lot of pressure. So coaches don't always have that kind of patience with someone who could be going through that. And like I said, I didn't even know that. I knew I had depression. I didn't know I had, the bipolar depression, which your lows are sometimes even lower than norm. So I'm glad that I kind of came out with it. But one thing I'm not making excuses for, my lackluster career. But I came out to encourage other people that you can bounce back from this, and you just have to get the help you need, and you have to be willing to talk to someone, because I was so embarrassed, and and I was really just too proud to get help. And now I think it's a norm for people to talk about it, but then no one spoke about it.
I mean, it was a lot different back in the 1990s than it was today, with a lot of different issues. I mean, there were so many different things that were just not acceptable to talk about in the 1990s, but today, it's like the norm. Like, look at Ellen DeGeneres, of her show. I mean, when she was an actress back in the 1990s, she came out as gay, as LGBTQ, on one of her shows that she was appearing on, and she got a lot of negative press for it because she did that. And considering that it was the late 1990s, it was very controversial. But 20 years later, it's a lot less controversial, and it's very accepted, and it just shows a sign of the times. And it also is just like what you were talking about with your mental illness, with your bipolar depression. It was a lot different back in the 90s than it is today.
Oh my goodness, it's crazy how fast time goes. If you could live in any era, which era you live in?
I don't exactly know off the top of my head, but I think now would be the best era, which might also just be because of the fact that I haven't gotten to experience that many other eras with my own eyes. I mean, you've lived for a lot longer than I have. You've been a lot wiser, I guess you could say. But also, I think it's also just the fact that I guess I'm used to the times. I guess I'm used to the fact that this is the way we live. This is the normal that just our society has adapted to. So I guess not necessarily now because of the virus. I want to go 2 years ago before the virus, and just like, because that was like 2016 to 2018 was like a fever dream for me, and I think it was for a lot of other people too. But that's just my opinion. So, considering that you played in 3 separate, I guess, organized leagues, you played in college, you played overseas, and you played the WNBA, and I guess we'll throw in the ABL as well. What were, like, the main differences between those leagues? Like, what was different about them? Like, it could have been the atmosphere, it could have been the style of play, it could have been the coaching.
So, Brazil has a strong women's basketball tradition. I mean, Brazilians
and they still do today.
Basketball.
They still do today.
Yes, they have. They got 2 players in our Hall of Fame. Oscar, I don't know his last name, and Hortensia. They go by first names only in Brazil anyway. And that was my first time really playing in a country that the fans were so passionate that they were like fighting. We're neighboring teams. They were fighting each other in the stands. I went out of bounds one time, and a fan actually punched me.
Oh my gosh!
I've never experienced that before. That was like it was like life or death for them. This basketball game.
And that's how it is in soccer too. It's the same thing in soccer.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I can't imagine how it was after they lost that World Cup to Germany coming back home. But yeah, so it was hot, it's humid in there, no air conditioning, people smoking because they didn't have no smoking inside the arenas, and it's just, craziness.
That sounds very crazy.
It was. I guess he wouldn't have gotten away with that now, but it probably on YouTube, on social media. But
yeah.
And then the ABL, it was interesting because when I played for San Jose, I was, what do they call it? I was like their anchor player. It was like 2 of us, Jennifer and me. Like we were, I don't know what the word was, like the 2 foundational players for that team. And we were very proud about starting the league up. And a lot of the community outreach was about getting more butts in the seat and being role models for young girls. And I felt a lot of ownership in the league, just being there from the start. And then the WNBA, even though it was new, I didn't really have that vibe that it was my league, if that makes sense. Although I could tell that they had a bigger budget, and it was really cool playing inside the NBA stadiums. Even the Staples Center, when it smelled like poop the next day from a rodeo the day before. It was cool playing in the Staples Center. It was amazing playing in the Garden. That's a dream come true. I love playing there. I always play well in the Garden. So, those just subtle differences that, that I experienced that are just in the back of my mind that I'll never forget.
And playing in the WNBA, you got to play in the stadiums. What do you think was your, favorite stadium to play in, just from a personal standpoint, not from a statistical standpoint, I guess you could say?
Oh, let me think. What's my favorite place? It had to be the Garden because it still felt intimate in there, even though it was, a big arena. And also, being from the East Coast, my parents couldn't drive up to see me. That's when family, and I had my former players I worked with, they came to see me as well. So that's why it felt almost like home.
So you played in the WNBA from 1999 to 2001 to 2002, considering that you skipped 2000. But why, what was the deciding factor for your retirement in 2002?
Well, I got cut. I asked to be traded, and no one wanted to trade for me, so they cut me to see if anyone picked me up. And I had severe back issues, and I was rehabbing my back, and I just couldn't rehab it to come back. And that's one reason why I retired, but also I was still not fully recovered from. I never really got good treatment for my mental health either. So I valued my physical health and being in shape more than the mental and spiritual side of things of being an athlete.
So what was your favorite moment from your professional playing days in the sport? It could have been from Stanford, it could have been from Israel, Brazil, the ABL, the WNBA, could have been a game-winning shot, could have been anything. What was it?
I think my favorite moment was my junior year at Stanford when we were playing Tennessee on our court in Maples. They had just won the national championship the year before, and we were down 13 points with a minute and a half to go at home, and our fans were leaving. And I remember being on the foul line. I looked up, and people are just leaving, walking out, and we end up coming back and winning that game. I actually made the winning shot, and that's my favorite moment. Not because I made the winning shot, just because when no one else believed in us, we believed in ourselves, and we surprised some people that night, and ended up winning the national championship that year. So I always tell kids, you never know, never give up. You never know. There's always enough time. Anything can happen, and it was just craziness. And actually, that game was so intense that a guy had a heart attack that game. He lived, but he had a heart attack. That's how intense that game was.
Wow.
Because of all the ending and the last second shots and all that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds insane. That sounds crazy.
It was crazy. It was sold out crowd.
Oh, of course, until the end, because fans started walking out.
Oh, yeah. Yes, still was. Good point.
I mean, that's gotta be a, I guess, an uninspiring, moment if you're at the foul line and you're just thinking, wow, they don't believe in us, so they're just leaving. We're down by 13 points, this is doable, but they're just walking out. I mean, it's something that, unfortunately, you see at all sports venues these days. When a team's losing, they just don't, they want to beat the traffic, and if you're in Philly, because I go to a lot of Phillies games, those fans, they leave early, but if the Phillies come back and win, then I just say joke's on them, because maybe it's just my perspective from being... Yeah, well, thing about that, though, is that when you're at the Citizens Bank Park, the Phillies crowd and the Eagles crowd, it's the same people, but they completely have different moods in either the Eagles Stadium or the Phillies Stadium. I don't know what it is, but whenever we walk into the Eagles Stadium, everybody becomes just a drunk, monster that just wants to destroy everything in sight. But when you go to a Phillies game, it's actually quite, I guess you could say, peaceful, if anything in Philly is peaceful. But it's definitely nicer going to that ballpark than it is going to the Link. But anyways, wrapping this up, my last question to you is, what is your advice to any young player who wants to become a pro athlete that plays in a professional league just like you did?
My biggest advice, and it's going to sound simple, is, and most people don't do this, is to set your goal, what you want to do, and then work your way backwards. Okay, for example, so you want to play in the WNBA. What is that going to take? All right, I need to play in college. If you have to play in college, you have to play 4 years. That's for WNBA to play. You have to play 4 years in college to go to the WNBA. That's for women's basketball. All right, so I have to play college 4 years. All right, what do I have to do before college? I have to play high school and AAU basketball. All right, what do I have to do every day? I gotta eat well. I have to lift weights. I gotta run. I gotta sleep well. I gotta study the game. So what happens? You have to do every day to get to that big goal of making it to the WNBA, and then also visualizing yourself being there, because a lot of times we can't see ourselves. You can see yourself there. Your brain is like, okay, maybe I'm already there. Maybe I'm gonna be there. But if you can't see yourself there and you don't dream big, then you're not gonna hit what is the word? What is it? Shoot for the stars, hit the moon.
I guess so. Shoot for the stars, whatever works.
Okay, and I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, Delaware is a very small state, as you know.
Oh, yes.
And people just wanted to be all state. All state, I want to be all state, all state. And I, in high school, wanted to be all American. And that was my goal. I didn't even care about All-State. If I was All-State, I might as well be on the All-Baloney team. That's how I felt about it. And so I got All-American, but I also, my sophomore year, I did not get All-American. I got All-State. But if I would have just gone for All-State, maybe I wouldn't have been even acknowledged at all. So you have to always make your goals stretchy. Have stretch goals. And I'm sure you have them for yourself in what you want to do in your career.
I mean, absolutely for me, considering that I want to be a sports broadcaster, this is like I guess you could say a stepping stone for that, having a talk show, and, it gets you closer to the microphone, because I want to go to Syracuse University, and they have a good broadcasting program there. So, I mean, you gotta have goals, and when Syracuse is the number one school for sports broadcasting, then I guess that is a prime example of stretching your goals.
It is. And the good thing about having goals like that is that when people tell you you can't do it, or when you're having a bad day, you can just open up your goal book, or if you keep it on your phone, and know what exactly you're going for, and keep your eye on the prize without sounding too cliche-ish.
So, that will wrap it up for this episode of the Dan Wilkins Show. Definitely a fun time talking to you, Coach Val, as you asked me to call you. So, that will wrap it up. So, thank you to Coach Val Whiting for joining us on episode 3 of the Dan Wilkins Show. Next week, we will interview Ethan Whitley, high school All-American and current infielder at UT Martin. So, signing off for now, this is Dan Wilkins with special guest Val Whiting. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.